Welcome back to the Docker command line options section of the Getting Started with Docker course. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the Docker information itself on our machine. So let's go to the command prompt. And here we're going to start with getting the version of Docker currently on our machine. So Docker version. And that tells me that the client is the Docker Engine Community Edition. The version is 18.09.2, and the API version is 1.39. Now, it's important because if you read the documentation, it will say this is as of 1.21, or this is as of 1.3. And so you now know, okay, my API version is 1.39. So anything in the documentation that was as of 1.39 or earlier, I have access to it. Okay? And there's also the Go version, the Git version. I don't typically see these as necessary. Now, the build version, that does tell you the last time that the Docker engine for the Community Edition was updated was February 10th. So you might want to check and see if there's a newer version out there if that gets too old. Or if you'd see that your API version is falling behind the documentation. Now, the server side for Docker, same thing as Community Edition, and same API version. The minimum version is 1.12. And again, it's running the Linux/AMD 64 operating system and architecture. And it's not the experimental version. Okay, so it's a little bit of information about Docker itself on your machine. This is not about images or containers. It's about what's running on your machine. Now, if you want to see more information about what's on your machine, how Docker is working, what it's set up as, Docker info will give you a whole list. So there's the entire list of 0 containers, the 0 are running, paused, or stopped, 9 images, the server version, the storage driver, plugins that I have, Swarm is inactive, all the way on down to the architecture, number of CPUs, number of amount of memory I've given to this, and so on. So that's a lot of information about Docker on your machine. Now there's another command that can be really useful, and that's the Docker system command. And system has a few different options. It has df, events, info, and prune. Now, you've already seen info. Now, the shortcut is Docker info. We can do Docker system info, and that will give you, again, system-wide information. But let's look at, this is a neat command, Docker system df. So it shows the disk usage. So if I say Docker system df, it breaks down images, containers, local volumes, and build cache, and then how much size on disk is available or used by these different systems. So in this case, my images, I have 5 images, and the size is 2.125 gigabytes on disk. Reclaimable is all of it. Meaning I could get rid of all of it because there's nothing using those images. Now, how do you get rid of or get back this reclaimable space? Really cool command right here, prune. Just like with volumes, the prune command here will remove all unused data. So if there's local volumes and images that are reclaimable, it'll remove both of them. So if I said Docker system prune, and it says it's going to remove all stopped containers, all networks not being used by one container or more, all dangling images, meaning an image is not currently being used, and then all dangling build cache, meaning cache is no longer needed. Are you sure you want to do that? Why, sure I am. So you put a Y, and total space or total reclaim space is 0 bytes, which is interesting because I have reclaimable of 2.125. Now, why is that? So if we go to look at our Docker system df again, it still says I've got reclaimable space and it has not gotten rid of those images. Well, the reason why is because it said all dangling images. Well, these aren't technically dangling images. So what I can do is say docker system prune -a for all. Now, if I also don't want to see that prompt, I can say -f for force. I do that, and now it's got a whole bunch of deletes, and now I have reclaimed space of 2.125 gigabytes. Now, if I do my docker system df, we can see that I have 0 images, 0 containers, 0 local volumes, and 0 build cache. We can confirm that by saying docker images, and there are no images. So that's how to both get information about Docker and about the Docker settings on your machine, but also how to look at the system information and what you could reclaim and then actually reclaim that space using the docker prune command, the docker system prune command. Okay? And that system prune is the overall big daddy prune where it's going to prune all the littler stuff down below. Just make sure you use the dashes, so -a for all and -f for force. So that's all images, and force the prune. Don't prompt for that yes, no option. On a development machine, not really a problem. You can have a -f. Probably anywhere else you shouldn't use -f because it's one last check to make sure that you think through what's going to happen. Okay? So that's the commands to actually control Docker. Now, our next video is going to cover some bonus commands that really didn't fit into one category. So we're just going to kind of lump them together and talk through a few different interesting pieces of information. So let's come on back for that.